Over the last century, authoritarian theological models, rigid frameworks where a supreme, paternal deity hands down unquestionable dogma, have steeply declined in the West. In their place, we see the rise of what sociologist Heidi Campbell calls pic-n-mix religion. Believers are assembling hybrid faiths, independently plucking symbols, rituals, and ethics from diverse traditions and secular philosophies to construct bespoke belief systems. In a highly interconnected, pluralistic society, this individualistic approach feels deeply authentic. It allows people to curate a spirituality aligned directly with their modern sensibilities and personal experiences. But this autonomy introduces a specific hazard. When you piece together only the beliefs that make you comfortable, you risk generating an entirely anthropocentric idol, a deity fashioned entirely in your own image. A God whose sole function is to reflect your exact desires and political opinions cannot demand moral growth. Instead of challenging your blind spots, this self-made idol merely rubber stamps your existing biases. Without a rigorous mechanism for testing and structuring these ideas, personalized religion fails to provide an objective moral compass. It collapses inward, resulting in spiritual narcissism rather than genuine human fulfillment. The late American theologian Gordon Kaufman recognized this exact danger. Kaufman proposed a solution: stop treating theology as the passive reception of revelation, and instead treat it as a deliberate, architectural act of human imagination. Kaufman built this method on an epistemological boundary first defined by Immanuel Kant. The human mind is bound by its own perceptions, meaning we have no empirical capacity to access the objective, actual God. Because the actual reality of God exists completely beyond our intellect, Kaufman argued that practical theology must concern itself exclusively with the phenomenal realm. We must focus entirely on the available God, the concept of God that we imaginatively construct. This is a literal assertion. As academics observed, his method rests on the premise that our notions about God are always our own imaginative construct. Because this concept functions to orient man in the world, it must be purposefully engineered. This shift toward treating God as a construct provides the necessary framework for a disciplined system, one where the builder acknowledges their own hand in the design. To build this framework, Kaufman outlined a structural blueprint known as the three-moment method. The first moment requires us to define the world. We gather our current empirical, scientific, and historical understanding of reality to establish the physical context we live in. In the second moment, we construct the concept of God. This serves as the ultimate point of reference, an ideal designed to morally orient our actions within that physical world. The third moment closes the loop. The concept of the world is adjusted to align with this new reference point. The most critical engineering happens inside the second node, the internal construction of God concept itself. To remain stable and functional, Kaufman argued that this internal archway requires two opposing load-bearing pillars. Without both of these pillars actively engaged, the concept will collapse into either oppressive authoritarianism or meaningless fluff. A functional theology cannot be a static list of beliefs. It operates as a dynamic system where reality and our highest ideals constantly recalibrate each other. The first load-bearing pillar is what Kaufman called the humanizing motif. Purely abstract, infinite concepts of God, an unknowable cosmic force, fail to orient human behavior. They offer no tangible instruction for how we should treat others. To be relatable and instructional, God must possess person-like, immanent characteristics. We need a concept capable of understanding our physical, moral, and social concerns. This motif functions by personifying the ideal human. It elevates the best traits of humanity, virtues like self-giving love, mercy, and justice, using historical examples to model how life ought to be lived. Kaufman notes that because human history provides a diverse range of models with competing values, we must deliberately select which figure exemplifies humanity's potential. When engineered correctly, this pillar provides a relatable ideal that pulls us out of our inherent narcissism. It directs believers to break down segregating walls. The humanizing motif transforms an abstract cosmic reality into a concrete moral guide that helps sustain loving and cooperative communities. However, relying solely on this first pillar carries a fatal flaw. A person like God, built entirely from human ideals, inevitably devolves into unchecked anthropocentrism. To counter this danger, the structure demands the second pillar, the relativizing motif. This motif represents the absolute limit. It is the ultimate point of reference that remains entirely other, overwhelmingly powerful, and firmly beyond human comprehension. While the humanizing motif acts as the immanent moral guide, the relativizing motif acts as the absolute power that judges human hubris. By establishing an infinite limit, it dictates that all human projects, and even our constructed theology itself, are provisional and flawed. It demands continuous self-criticism. The stability of the entire system relies on the architectural and philosophical concept of tensegrity, a structural integrity maintained by continuous, opposing tension. If the relativizing motif is too weak, the arch collapses to the left. The concept of God becomes a shallow, tribal idol justifying human agendas. If the humanizing motif is too weak, the arch collapses to the right. God becomes a terrifying, unknowable void with no relevance to daily life. The concept of God only functions safely as a symbol for our highest values when this severe internal dialectical tension is actively maintained. True theological rigor is not about finding perfect, unassailable dogma. It's about sustaining a paradox that permanently prevents humans from claiming absolute divine authority. Once the God concept is stabilized by these internal pillars, we have to evaluate the theological model as a whole. Kaufman separates the internal humanizing motif from an external, pragmatic test he calls the criterion of humanization. This criterion is a universal standard. It asks a single empirical question. Does this theological framework actually advance moral orientation, justice, and genuine fulfillment in the real world? It demands that we look at material outcomes. We must contrast worldviews resulting in loving communities against those manifesting as oppression, segregation, and division. While academics critique this criterion as overly vague, its power lies in universal, cross-cultural applicability. It doesn't dictate a specific ritual, it demands a specific human outcome. Regardless of your personal faith, your cultural tradition, or secular worldview, the ultimate validation of any belief system is its measurable, real-world impact on human well-being. We see this standard implicitly utilized by global social justice movements. Diverse coalitions consistently invoke shared humanizing criteria to dismantle oppressive dogmas and advocate for life-affirming policies. We also see the exact opposite. History provides evidence of the consequences that occur when hubristic human projects operate completely unchecked by any relativizing limit. The criterion functions as a check against destruction by demanding continuous, critical self-assessment of our values. For the modern believer practicing pic-n-mix religion, Kaufman's method offers an essential intellectual safeguard. It provides structural boundaries for those operating outside the guardrails of traditional religious institutions. By fully embracing theology as a highly deliberate act of imaginative construction, we can responsibly and ethically synthesize pluralistic ideas. Anchored by the tension between humanizing and relativizing motifs, the constructed concept of God functions as a focus for orientation that exceeds personal preference.